Hi everyone! Today we're going to explore the world of medieval music, a period that spans roughly from the 5th to the 15th century. This was a time of significant transformation in both culture and music, where the foundations for much of Western musical tradition took place. How do we know this? Because of written records that come from this period. Music of the medieval period was shaped directly by the religious, political, and social structures of the time. The most dominant force was the Church, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, and thus for centuries the majority of music was composed for religious purposes, and the clergy were the primary musicians. The medieval period also witnessed the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of feudalism, with regional monarchies and the spread of Christianity influencing musical development. Aristocrats sought positions in the church to strengthen their political influence, and naturally, musical activities took place in the church and the courts of the aristocrats, respectively for worship and entertainment purposes. With the strong influence of the church, music was sung in Latin largely, until vernacular songs spread in varying regions and courts. Later, university establishments also contributed to the development of music. One of the most significant figures in medieval music was Guido of Arezzo. Guido was an Italian music theorist who lived in the 11th century, and he is often referred to as the father of music notation. Before Guido, music was passed down orally, and it was very difficult for singers to learn chants by ear without a standardized system. Guido revolutionized music notation with his invention of staff notation. His system used a 4-line staff, which made it much easier to read and reproduce music accurately. In addition to the staff, Guido introduced the Guidonian hand, a mnemonic device to help singers learn pitches. This led to the development of solfege, which is the practice of associating set syllables with pitches, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and it is still used today in music education, integral to musical training. At the beginning of the medieval period, music was primarily monophonic, meaning there was only one melodic line with no harmony. The earliest and most recognizable form of medieval music is Gregorian chant, a form of plain chant used in the liturgy of the church. This style was named after Pope Gregory I, though it was more likely an evolution of earlier Christian traditions. Gregorian chant is unaccompanied, that is, a cappella, sung in Latin, and features smooth, flowing melodies that follow the natural rhythm of the Latin text. The chants were performed by choirs of monks or clergy, often during Mass or other religious services. Main examples of the chants include musical settings of the texts for Mass Ordinary, which entailed Kyrie, Gloria, Credo, Sanctus, and Agnus Dei, and hymns, which were in strophic forms. The first listening example of such chant is Ave Generosa by Hildegard of Bingen, who lived from 1098 to 1179. She was not only a composer known for her music, but for her visions, and was a highly esteemed religious leader, artist, poet, and scientist as well. This piece is an example of monophonic hymn, strophic in form, which means that changing texts are sung to the same melody. It consists of both syllabic and melismatic singing, and in this performance, we hear the application of the drone, a sustained pitch under the chant, which is an evolution from the monophony towards polyphony. Notice how conjunct the melody is, establishing smooth flowing character. As heard in the example, soon monks began experimenting with adding a second voice as a drone and an improvisation. Such explorations led to the development of organum, second voice added to the chant melodies, resulting in early forms of polyphony. By the 12th and 13th centuries, polyphonic music had become more complex. Leonin and Perotin are important composers from these times respectively, who have left records of the polyphonic chants and Magnus Liber Organi, the Great Book of Organum. Rhythm notation developed, and composers began creating multiple independent voices, often in a more structured way, leading to the development of motets, a vocal composition with several voices, and cantus firmus techniques, where a pre-existing melody forms the foundation for new compositions. Masses also employed this technique of polyphony. Agnus Dei from the Notre Dame Mass by Guido de Machaut from 14th century is an example of such polyphony. Guido de Machaut was a prolific poet and composer who left many works. This is one movement from the ordinary of the Mass, and as such, sung in Latin. The form is ABA, and there are 4 vocal parts, and melismatic singing can be heard at various points. While the church dominated music for centuries, the secular realm also produced rich musical traditions. During the 12th and 13th centuries, the troubadours and trouvères in France and the minstrels in England began composing songs of courtly love, heroism, and social commentary. These songs were sung in vernacular, often performed with instruments, and their melodies were more varied and expressive than liturgical music. A Chantar is an example of a troubadour song. It is in strophic form. While early medieval music was predominantly vocal, instruments also played an essential role. Lutes, harps, flutes, and drums were common in secular performances, and the organ began to appear in liturgical settings by the 9th century. Cantigas de Santa Maria No. 181 is another example of secular music, also in strophic form. Notice that the subject matter is Virgin Mary, a sacred topic, though the piece was intended for entertainment outside of church. It is insightful of the heavy influence of the church in this period. Through the records and examples studied, we see that the groundwork for the development of Western classical music literacy is rooted in the medieval period and church music. From the sacred sounds of Gregorian chant to the birth of polyphony and the rise of secular musical traditions, this era set the stage for the flowering of music in the Renaissance and beyond. It was a time of immense creativity, experimentation, and growth, and its establishments continue to influence music to this day.